The first ever movie screening took place in Paris on December 28, 1895. Just 5 years later, in the spring of 1901, the first directed film shots featuring actors were taken in Budapest. This marked the birth of Hungarian film. These short motion pictures were not standalone works, but illustrations for a lecture on the history of dance. As the new century dawned, people marveled at the wealth of new inventions and discoveries appearing virtually every day. Thus was born the craving for information on all subjects. The Uránia Theatre of Science was established for this noble purpose. Its intention was to inform the general public about scientific achievements using the latest aids and techniques. Educational presentations on the most varied of subjects were arranged in the magnificent building on today's Rákóczi Road. The lengthy readings and travel descriptions were initially made more interesting with projected pictures, and then by bringing in the latest invention, motion pictures. Initially, they used films purchased from abroad until the patron of Uránia, Viktor Molnár, and writer Gyula Pekár decided to create Hungarian shorts to accompany the extensive lecture on the history of dance. The films were directed by Béla Zsitkowski, Uránia's talented photographer. Together with his two-man crew, he began work in January. Using a projector he himself redesigned into a camera, the team shot the films on the roof terrace of Uránia. 20 short 1 to 2 minute scenes, so-called cinematograms. However, in the course of drying the highly flammable nitro film, a bulb exploded and fire broke out in the laboratory. 3 weeks before the planned premiere, all the footage taken up until then was destroyed. At this critical moment, the Uránia management put out an appeal to the general public, calling for help to rescue the first Hungarian film. Thanks to public donations and the enthusiasm of participants, the scenes were reshot. Thus, the presentation could be held on the originally planned date of April 30th, 1901. The 2-hour lecture was a huge success and remained on the program for more than 10 years, constantly changing and expanding with new shots. It played at the Uránia on 136 occasions and then was taken into the countryside and abroad. In fact, even the French, who are considered the pioneers of motion pictures, screened the films. The author and reader of the lecture was the much-traveled writer Gyula Pekár, who later became one of the leading figures in state film management. The diverse musical material was compiled by composer Aurel Kern, who later became director of the Opera House. Since at the time film did not come with its own audio, the Uránia Orchestra played live at the time the shots were filmed and during the performances. Dancers were instructed by the ballet master of the Opera House, Cesare Smeraldi. 36 ballerinas took part in the filming, with male roles being danced by women. Béla Zsitkowski, one of the first Hungarian cinematographers, was an outstanding figure among the technical personnel. He trained as a photographer. He ran the Uránia Photo Laboratory, but he quickly realized the significance of the latest invention, motion pictures. Later on, he made many documentary and instructional films, and he was the cameraman on more than 30 feature films. Pekár won over the biggest stars of Budapest theaters who had already successfully played similar characters on stage. The blonde miracle Emilia Marcus performed the Dance of the Seven Veils. Luisa Blaha, Nightingale of the Nation, performed the Csárdás, and the young operetta prima donna Sári Fedak performed the Japanese dance. Gyula Hegedűs, the popular artist of farces at the Comedy Theatre, appeared in the Csárdás parody. Everyone sensed that this was not merely an ordinary appearance, but instead an avant-garde experiment the birth of a totally new art. Bela Radic, the legendary rock star gypsy first violinist, also participated in the recordings. Unfortunately, like most silent movies, these films have been lost. Today, we can only imagine what they were like from posters, photographs, lecture scripts, and press reports that have survived. The most important artifact is a heavy bound album that Gyula-Pekár himself compiled. The album contains the entire lecture script and numerous illustrations, drawings, paintings, and photographs. In and of itself, it is truly a work of art. It also includes stills of the dance scenes taken during filming. Thanks to the rich documentation, we know the majority of actors, musicians, and dancers by name. But why exactly dance? There are many dance recordings among early films because the topic itself is mobile and made for film. One of the most astonishing tinted recordings by Edison depicted the Serpentine dance. Pekár sourced the idea of the dance film from the spectacular ballet performances he saw at the Paris Expo in 1900, where visitors could marvel at modern dances, ethnographic folk dances of various nations, and famous dances of ancient times. This division into three parts was evident in Pekár's lectures, and the similarity of the posters is also striking. The journey through the history of dance begins in ancient Greece with the music of a drinking song performed to the accompaniment of panpipes. The dance of Salome from the Bible was performed by Emilia Marcus, the ideal of her day. One of the finest periods in dance history was evoked in scenes of Renaissance dances performed by actors dressed in lavish costumes. The dignified slow pavane, that is, the peacock dance, and the serene dynamic gaillard of Italian origin were popular in the royal courts of Europe for a century. The somewhat cumbersome but cheerful allemande makes an interesting counterpoint to the Mediterranean atmosphere. Performing fiery Mediterranean dances, the Spanish cachucha with castanet accompaniment, and the tempestuous southern Italian folk dance, the tarantella, did not cause any difficulties for dancers of the opera house. In the court of the Sun King, formal dances were more popular than ever, and the best dancer was, naturally, the king himself. In the 18th century, the light-spirited Rococo dances, the passe-pied, the gavotte, and the minuet, ruled the dance floors. It is evident that the ballerinas also thoroughly enjoyed the Rococo atmosphere, full of lace, ribbons, and scent. Our arrival in the era of the waltz, the 19th century, is heralded with the southern German Ländler and the lively tempo of the mazurka. Unfortunately, not even a photo has survived of the ice waltz, shot with Viennese figure skaters at the City Park ice rink in February. To conclude the round-the-world tour, the Geta dance by the young Shadi Fedak whisks us away to Japan. It's interesting that this scene was also shot at the Paris World Expo in 1900, similarly featuring Shadi Fedak. The national pride around the millennium period was also manifested in that the lecture reached its high point with Hungarian dances. Pekár criticized young people for dancing the Boston instead of Hungarian dances. After all, they could learn our own pavane, the slow and stately polotás, the recruiting dance also known as the verbunkos, and the körmagyar, which translates to round Hungarian. The film shows how the csárdas should be danced and how it shouldn't. The modern csárdas scene parodied the urban middle class who, dressed in evening wear, danced enthusiastically but in a clumsy manner. Pekár was of the belief that only village people could dance the true csárdas. There are elements of a feature film in the real csárdas scene. Luisa Blaha, as the innkeeper's wife, flirts with the huszár who pays no heed. However, the wine begins to have an effect and they start to dance. This passionate and increasingly rapid csárdas is the closing motif of the lecture. This is no coincidence. For many, this dance personifies the Hungarian temperament to this day. This scene, which was played many times on stage, featured Luisa Blaha's favorite musician, Géza Lányi, playing the cimbalom. A few photographs also reveal the circumstances under which filmmaking took place. Here are the rooftops around Uránia and Gyula Pekád. Here, inquisitive eyes study the ballerinas from a neighboring building. This picture shows the Verbunkos scene, also sourced from Folkworks, with actor Mihai Kish in a bowler hat and an overcoat. Due to the chilly weather in April, additional footage was taken in May, including the famous Csárdás scene added to the lecture later. During a later screening, amidst celebrations by the audience, Luisa Blaha watched all the scenes, even though she had initially voiced certain reservations about cinema. "Film has solved the immortality of actors," gushed the papers. Thus, Hungarian film took off with broad cohesion, enormous dynamism, and massive success. It utilized and incorporated elements of literature, music, dance, and acting, while also attempting to exploit its own means of expression. Even though not one single frame of the film has survived, its story is still worthy of remembrance for posterity. And just perhaps, one day the lost films themselves may come to light from the hidden depths of an archive somewhere in the world.